another episode of The Heart of the Matter. Today we're just going to have a chat. I have my co-presenter, Omilola Oshikoya, with me, and also we have visiting us, Eryca Freemantle. We're just going to talk about 2014. 2014 has meant different things to different people. Some people have felt this is a annus horribilis, a horrible year. For some people, it's been a great year. And I'm going to start by just talking about Ebola, because Ebola came to Nigeria's shores in July, and Nigeria beat Ebola. Contrary to what most people thought, we beat Ebola, and we had on this episode Dr. Ada Igono, and she told her story of how she got over the Ebola crisis. Because everybody panicked, you know, and people didn't want to come to church. They didn't want to go to public. They stopped going to restaurants and supermarkets and all that, because they were afraid that they might get Ebola. What was your take on Ebola at the time?
Well, when it happened, it was actually really scary, and it just showed me how fear can paralyze a person. I mean, at one point, a lot of people were saying, all of a sudden, then they start feeling like they have a temperature rise, and you know, a lot of people panicked. A lot of people left the country. A lot of people stayed at home. I think for me, it was a time where I realized how strong fear is and how it's important to be grounded in terms of your faith, because things will happen in the world that we live in, but it's your faith that will get you through. And I think for me, the amazing thing was to see that, because at some point I felt God say, have peace, I've got this, but I didn't understand how in a country like Nigeria, everyone thought it was going to be an epidemic. And then to hear that we were able to beat it, I think it just raised my faith and just gave me hope that, you know, when God says something, it will come to pass. Yes. You should just trust Him no matter what goes on around you. That's right. You must trust Him, and then you must be strong in your faith, because when the tough times come, that's what will keep you going.
There is no cure. We knew there was no cure. There was no vaccine. There wasn't anything we could take to, you know, something we could drink, or, you know, a vaccination, something that could be given to us to prevent the virus, if it's already in us, from replicating further. We really had to just watch, prayerfully hope that if the virus is in us, it will be destroyed. You know how, you know, optimistic we can be, just so that we can. Everybody's saying there's no cure to this thing. And the only thing that could possibly heal me, and the only person that could heal me, was God. At this point, it was 100% dependency on God.
Eryca, you must have visited Nigeria during this.
I did. Nothing, nobody, not even Ebola could have stopped me coming.
But I'm sure a lot of your friends in the UK...
My friends, my family, even immigration said to me, why are you going? And I just felt, for me, it was a test of my faith and my belief in Nigeria. I came through immigration, and the gentleman said to me, we're not looking to see you come back. This was in the UK. Wow. Alive. But for me, it was very interesting to see how people's reaction. I didn't come at the initial stage in July. I came more, I think it was in September, but it was still, people were still nervous. But for me, as you quite rightly said, is to see how people really pulled together. There was a lot of praying and a lot of belief. And I was actually here when Nigeria got cleared as well. And that was almost like a party, a festival. And I have to say, well done to everyone involved, and for the doctor that sacrificed her life too. You know, some people did suffer, a lot of people suffered, but remarkable, remarkable.
And last word on that is, if anybody from the government is watching, we're still waiting to have you give her a posthumous honor. So don't forget. This was also the year in which we had somebody on the episode, on our program, who had survived in a bubble at the bottom of the sea. Oh. His boat capsized, if you remember. What's his name again?
Harrison. Okay.
Harrison, okay.
Wow.
His boat capsized, and he saw people die. Wow. But he managed to get into a bubble, and he was there for 3 days until the divers came and found him. Yeah. And they didn't expect to find anybody.
In fact, he said when he reached out, they thought he was they said corpse. They thought it was a dead body, you know. But it was amazing. That story was amazing. And I think that's even we've had on our YouTube channel. We've had the most hits with that particular story as well.
I know I have access to nothing, so I was just there. So when I go down, I try to come back. When I'm getting weak, I pour the water on my body. I go back to where I am.
So were you totally in the air bubble, or were you just, your head, how much of your body was actually in the bubble, and how did you get to that position?
If I'm in the water, that I want to bring my head out, it will be about 3 meters.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have to like break the fibers in the body of the vessel. I have to pull them with my hands.
Okay,
And
this
pull
is
them.
the fibers that made up the structure of the vessel.
Yes.
You broke them and used
Pull
them
it,
to
yeah,
support
to sustain
yourself.
myself. So that's from my waist up will be at the air bubble. From my waist down will be in the water.
And what about that cold? Wasn't that affecting your
It
body?
was
What about
very, very cold.
your limbs?
It was affecting me seriously.
This is a miracle.
That is it.
I can imagine a bubble under the sea.
Yeah. His boat capsized, so there's a little bubble of air.
Yeah, the bubble of
And
air.
that's all he had for 3 days, and a bottle of Coke. You know, he was able to find a bottle of Coke.
Wow.
And it's also a story of faith, because there in there he was praying.
Can you imagine how
was praying.
frightened he was?
And it wasn't very warm in there.
No,
It was
and
cold.
wet. Cold.
And there were sharks, weren't there?
Yeah. And he
So-
didn't realize that everyone else had died.
Oh.
The rest of the crew had died.
That was one of the high points, because it's great for him to just tell his story, what went through his mind all those 3 days, because you've got lots of time.
So much
You're not
time.
going anywhere. And you know, and then during this year we also had the Chibok girls. You know, and we still don't have them back. And this is over 200 days.
Yes.
You know, so
That's quite sad. And there have been more kidnappings as well.
there was worse than the Chibok girls. If you remember, before the Chibok girls were taken, they went into a school, a boys' school. The boys were all asleep, and they shot 40 boys dead in their beds. So we really have to do something about religious tolerance. And I think that people of all faiths need to begin to preach more tolerance. I mean, right now what we're saying is these are extremists, but we need to tolerate each other's faith without allowing the extremism that it tends to end up.
I think it goes back to talking about love as well. It all boils down to love, you know. And I'm sure all religions are, the foundation of all religions, different types, is love,
Is
you know.
love.
So we must learn to love despite our differences.
This year's, what was your favorite episode this year?
Well, I think couple. I think hearing Eryca's story
Wow.
was, for me, many things. Because I remember earlier on in the year, I was reading Forbes magazine, and I read her story, and I didn't know her at the time, and I was like, wow. And that wasn't even the full story. That was just a small bit, you know. And I was really inspired, and I would never have thought that someone that I was, you know, reading about in the Forbes I would get to, you know, speak to her and hear the bigger story. So that was that's one of my favorites. I also the Dr. Ada as well. I think also the one about Nigeria, where we had the episode where we talked about the issues we have in Nigeria, and it was an eye-opener for me because I always used to think that if anyone asked me what's the problem with Nigeria, I would say corruption, but that's just a symptom. And from what we discussed that day, what I found out that was the problem of Nigeria is the fact that we don't have a common purpose or vision. And it was confirmed the day Fela Durotoye came to church and he spoke, and that's exactly what he said as well, you know. So I'm hoping that, you know, people realize that and we all begin to do something.
I think one of the most important things that he said is that every individual Nigerian has to take responsibility for Nigeria.
Yeah.
And if we all did, if we all said, right, I am not going to be corrupt in my corner, I am going to do what is right, even if everybody else is doing what is wrong. I will not drive down the one-way road the wrong way. I will not bribe policemen and so on and so forth. So it's about taking responsibility, and that's it. Now back to Eryca just for a moment. 2014.
Wow.
What has this year represented to you?
Wow. It's been one of the most remarkable, if not the most remarkable year of my life for lots of reasons, issues I've had with my body, how I've overcome lots of things, but the most important thing is my rebirth and connecting with God, finding the faith, holding on to the faith and believing that there is a future, and my future is in Nigeria, holding on to that and pursuing that, because it's not many people at 50 pack their bags and go somewhere else through choice. So for me, many things, but I found real people that I can connect with, that I can enhance their lives and they can enhance my life, and I look forward to the future.
Wonderful. So would you say that 2014 has been a turning point for you?
I think the biggest turning point in my life, yes, definitely.
And just take this thought. The 2015 will be better.
I look forward to it. Bring it on.
We need to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Watch your favorite Heart of the Matter episodes online at www.theheartofthematter.tv. Also, check out exciting behind-the-scenes photos. Leave your comments and like us on Facebook.
Welcome back to the Heart of the Matter. We're talking about 2014, the year 2014, and we still have with us Eryca Freemantle. Recently, there's been a devaluation in the Naira as a result of the fall in oil prices. A lot of people are a bit confused.
They're worried, and I think that they have every reason to not worry, but to reflect, because if you keep on doing the same things, you will keep on getting the same results.
Yeah.
Our oil price has gone down because the demand for oil is down. It's down because the Americans are producing shale oil and gas, and shale oil and gas competes directly with Nigerian crude, because we produce a sweet crude, they call it, which produces petrol, diesel, and kerosene, not so much the heavier products. Now, that trend is likely to continue because the United States is planning to export, not just depend on their own production, but to export shale oil and gas as well. But Nigeria's still got great potential. We've got a resource in the earth called gas, natural gas we're flaring, we're not really using. And we've got many industries that come from the oil industry, like the petrochemical industry. You've got plastics and all that. So there is hope, but we've got to tighten our belts for the immediate future. And I think that we shouldn't allow the gloom of all the predictions that we're going to read in the newspapers to dampen that spirit of the Nigerian.
Yeah.
You know, Eryca, you can give a Nigerian a mobile phone, and you've given him a business center.
I've seen it.
You know, so we are natural entrepreneurs,
right,
and we shouldn't let that spirit die. We should keep on at it, because it's going to be. This country has 170 million people. That is a market. It's a huge market that needs to be clothed, that needs to be fed, that needs to be housed, and all kinds of things. So if we see it not as a curse, but as potential, you know, we need to feed all our people. Then people will begin to do things that provide goods and services to this teeming mass of people. You know, anyway, that's just my take on the subject. One thing that somebody came to church recently shared with us was that God spoke to him and said, by the year 2025, which is just over 10 years from now,
10 years, yes.
we would be the most desirable nation to live in. Now, most people would see that as, how can this thing be? We've, you know, as it is now, you travel abroad, and as soon as they see your Nigerian passport, they think, you know, these people are here.
Yes.
But becoming the most desirable nation to live in is doable. And I think that it's not because of the resources we have, it's because of the people we have.
Definitely.
If the people decide we are going to do it, we can do it.
I agree, and I think it's the same way, even with giving birth to a child, there's the painful process of labor, but once the child is born, there's joy, you know, and so for Nigeria to be great, there'll probably be birth pains, which is probably what we're going through
right
now.
Yes.
But eventually, I mean, I really believe that we are going to be great. I believe that everything that we have been through is to bring us closer to God, because it's in hard times that you realize that there's a higher power than you need. Because if everything was going well,
All
then
the time.
you wouldn't really need, you know, God. So I believe Nigerians are praying people. And I believe there's still a lot of good. Yes, the bad gets publicized, but there's a lot of good. There are a lot of good people who are willing to do, and which brings us to elections as well. Elections are coming up, you know.
Well, just before we talk about elections, you know, they say tough times never last, but tough people do.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that makes tough people last is because they learn the lessons from the tough times. And we need to learn the lessons we faced. We have, you're talking about elections, we've elected, in the past, we've elected people who were not really competent to lead the nation.
Okay.
And we need to, and you know, we've allowed people to bribe, you know, they give us a bag of rice and say, vote for me. And that rice will finish in no more than a month.
Yeah, no time.
And then you don't see or hear from them anymore until they need your vote again.
Wow.
So this time round, because we've got elections starting in February, this time round we need to vote with our consciences. We need to vote for people who have proven that they can do, they will add value to the nation.
Yeah, to the nation.
And not for people that will pocket the nation. If you're out there, viewers, and you haven't yet got your voters, your permanent voters card, go to your local government office and get it. Because without your card, you can't vote. And without a vote, anybody will end up in office.
So, what advice would you give Christians for the year 2015? Given the fact that looking at the economy and all the things that is happening right now, what would you say? Because at the same time, even in times of famine, some people are blessed. Like
of course,
even in Joseph's time in Egypt, it was a good season for them when the rest of all the other nations were going through a period of famine. So I think, as a Christian, once you have faith, you know, there's nothing to fear.
Well, this is my approach to the subject. Many of us walk on water without realizing it. Because if you're walking by faith, you don't see, you don't feel, but you just know inside you that this is what's going to happen. And so we need to have faith, but not a misplaced kind of faith. It has to be faith towards God. Scriptures say faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word. So God must have said something to you, and you know it is God, and because you know it is God, you know his word doesn't return to him empty. It'll always come to pass. We have to walk by faith, and we need to grow our faith. You know, you grow faith by listening to the faith stories of others. When you see that somebody has been somewhere and they didn't have anything but holding on to God. Just like that woman that said, if I could only touch the hem of his garment. That for her was the last option, you know. And then she touched his garment. It was a touch of faith, not just to physical touch. She touched it and said, my story is going to change because I've come into contact with Jesus. So I think that we've got to do everything we can to encourage our faith. Sometimes that means you cut off some people.
Definitely. Yeah.
Because there are people that will speak negative and choke your faith. You make a statement of faith and they will look at you and say, but how can that ever happen? You remember there's a story in the Bible when Elisha the prophet came to Samaria, which was besieged. They had a famine in the land, and people they'd actually started eating their children. And Elisha said, this time tomorrow, a dollar will sell for 20 naira. You know, something like that. He said, you know, the price of food is going to change. And somebody, one of the king's aides said, even if God opened the windows of heaven, how can this be? It's impossible. But you know the story.
Yeah.
God just got 4 lepers who changed the whole story of Israel. So I believe that if God can put deserts, oasis into a desert, he can change your story if you're walking with him. But I think you really have to have a walk with him. You have to, you know, he is a God that doesn't just want you to talk to him, he wants to talk to you.
Yes.
He wants you to come into his presence and hear from him, get encouraged by him, strengthened by him. And he's only too happy to do this for us every day.
It reminds me of, there's a Bible verse, can't remember, I think it's Ecclesiastes, but it says, my beloved is to me like a cluster of henna blooms in the valley of is this Songs of Solomon?
Songs of Solomon.
In the valley of En-Gedi. And when God brought that verse to me, I went and did some research. And it was amazing. The En-Gedi is like an oasis in the middle of a desert. And in the wilderness, it's all gloom and doom. But in there's an oasis called En-Gedi, and it's then the henna blooms. They grow in there, and then they bring out an aroma that is so strong and so sweet that if you're in the wilderness, you can smell it, and it draws you closer, you know. And it also talks about, I think that's one of the places David hid when he was running away from Saul, and also somewhere that he was able to bring out some of the Psalms. So for me, that's a revelation in terms of no matter what is going on around you, you can be that En-Gedi, you can be that oasis, you can be that, you know, and you can bring out a sweet smelling aroma that will draw people, you know, so.
Okay, let me shift focus a little for a moment. Family. So I believe that we need to pay much more attention to our families in the year 2015. And I'll just share this story with you. You know the story of the Garden of Eden. Eve took the apple, she fed it to Adam, and then in the end, God cursed Adam and said, Adam, from now on, you are going to toil and struggle, and the earth is going to bring forth thorns and thistles. And then to Eve, he turned around and said, you're cursed. From now on, you're going to bring forth your children in pain and labor and so on and so forth. One would have thought that Adam and Eve would not have been able to continue their marriage, that they would have broken up, because here, this is the woman that brought this curse upon me, this is the man that, you know, but they got their act together, because they still, in spite of the fact that they'd fallen, they still saw a greater future.
Yes, they had.
And so they got over what had happened in the past, and they had children. And you know, they actually named their children as God gave them names. They dedicated their children to God, even though this is the God that they just cursed them. So what I'm saying is that whatever's happening in the family, we can get over it.
Yes, we can.
We can deal with it. We can learn to be more forgiving, so that we can move forward and drop the past. The past will never come back to bite you unless you let it.
I think family, I didn't realize the significance of family for me. I've always had them, and I suppose to a point you take them for granted. And I tried to go through certain things about my family, but at the end of the day, I had to call upon my family, and we pulled together as one and we prayed. That's just one example for me to really understand the true value of your family, because they don't judge you. They're there for you no matter what, no matter when, no matter where. So I totally agree with you. Even here, being in Nigeria, yes, I'm an international brand, but my family, you know, they call me every day, they support me, they know I'm happy here, but my blood family at home, I have their blessing to be amongst my new family here.
I'm happy you said that, because we're trying to take church to where we are a family of families.
Yes.
And you know, I've found that in a family there's so many dynamics at work.
So many.
You know, children, if their father is not there for them at the right stage of their growth, they could end up in jail.
Most definitely.
You find a lot of African American kids in America
Yes.
who didn't get to know their fathers end up in jail.
Yes.
The same with daughters. Daughters could
Yes.
become wayward.
Yeah,
if
that's
they
an
didn't have an
interesting
input.
word, but yeah, wayward, yeah.
Well, it's a
definitely.
word that I heard from my parents. That
Yes,
was the way
yes.
they described it in those
No,
days.
that's why I said interesting, because it brought me back to my youth. Yeah, so yes.
So family is so important. And
Yeah.
you know, viewers, time. You can't have family without giving your family
Time.
lots and lots of time. Time for your children, time for your wife. You know, people get married and then they stop dating.
Yes.
And I think your husband takes you out on dates, doesn't he?
Yes, it does.
Otherwise, we'll give him a smack. You know, we need to keep the relationship burning.
Yes.
And sometimes just a date doesn't have to be an expensive restaurant. It could be a walk across the bridge and
Yeah.
back. You know?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, we've so enjoyed bringing this episode to you as we round up the year 2014. Our prayer is that 2015 will be a greater year for you than 2014 was, and that you will learn how to take all the challenges and overcome them, and make this a year in which God glorifies himself in your life and through your life. So we, on behalf of Eryca, on behalf of Omilola, we wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. God bless you. Stay tuned. We'll be back again next week with another episode of The Heart of the Matter.